Well, families, especially children and parents, are facing a challenging time right now with school starting up soon, and some districts even allowing students to come back to school. The Children's Bereavement Center of South Texas is addressing the stress and anxiety related to the uncertainty of the upcoming school year. Ashley Jesse is a counselor with the center, and she's joining us live to talk more about that and what they're doing for kids and parents. Ashley, first of all, talk to us about what's some of the feedback you're hearing from students and parents about their fears and anxiety of going back next year.
I think a big concern, of course, is ultimately anxiety. What we're seeing is during such a difficult time of uncertainty, it's hard to know the best decision is for families. I think it's important to note that it's normal to feel anxious when dealing with uncertainty. It's important to talk to your children about their worries and encourage them to share their thoughts and their feelings about going back to school. You want to talk to them about anxiety, how it affects us mentally and physically, and things that we can do as parents to manage our anxieties, and also to teach our children how to manage their anxieties.
And starting that conversation with your kiddos is really important, I'm hearing you say right now, and you guys are offering something to help start that conversation at home. Is that correct?
Correct. So we actually have a few services that we're providing. We do have online counseling that we are providing through the Center for Grief Services, but we also have the Consult a Counselor line. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, please know that you're not alone and that you can call to speak to a counselor if you are having some difficulties.
And Ashley, before we go, we've talked about how to start that conversation with your kids, but what are some ways that parents can support their children after school begins?
I think just teaching them relaxation skills, if they're feeling uncertain or overwhelmed, help them to practice deep breathing. Also, with anxiety, there's a sense of not having control, and that can actually worsen the anxiety. So, if we're able to talk to our children about preparing to go back to school, help them practice washing their hands, and encourage, help them practice wearing a mask and staying in their own space or their own bubble so that they can stay safe. And just remind them that they can talk to you anytime they're feeling overwhelmed. As parents, we can on ourselves to practice deep breathing and relaxation strategies, and we can also teach those to our children.
All right, thank you, Ashley, so much for joining us, and that's great advice. If you missed some of this information, we'll have it posted later on our website at kens5.com.